follow with those dances. Mr. Dost, I was taking notes that entire time, so hopefully I'll be able to replicate that someday. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Scott, and I've been Chris's best friend and his partner in crime for many years now. But before I get started, I'd actually just really like to quickly shout out the two gentlemen who grew up with me on my street, Chris, of course, being one of them, and Mr. Dave Robbins being the other. I just want to say it's been an absolute honor to be a part of both of your weddings and to have you a part of mine. And I can't wait to see where the future takes us, and I love that we're still as close as we are to this day. So cheers to you both. And now, if I may, I'd like to focus on Chris, the man who brings us all here tonight. When Chris first asked me to be his best man, I knew it would be tough to come up with a speech as compassionate and funny and as heartfelt as he has been as a friend. But here it goes. I grew up about 5 houses away from Chris, and even though we were born only 8 days apart in the same hospital, it wasn't until the first grade that we actually met for the very first time. Now, I should say that I was probably the shyest kid in the world in first grade. I was afraid of my own shadow, pretty much. But I remember one day, I decided that it was time for me to make a friend, and I couldn't look back, so I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. First person I see, I'm going to make them my friend. So that happened to be Chris. So I was nervous, and I walked up to the lunch line, and Chris was standing in line, clutching his Power Rangers lunchbox. And I said, all right, this is it, that's my in, it's the way to go. So I went up to him and I said, Chris, how you doing? Power Rangers are my favorite show too. Now, I don't know what exactly I was expecting out of that comment. I pretty much thought I was making a friend for life. What happened in reality is that Chris just looked at me, and looked away and looked down at the ground. And I was devastated. I Pam told him not to trust people from 9 to the street. He thought I was trying to steal his lunchbox or something. That's kind of what I assumed. I'm not really sure. But either way, it was not what I was expecting. And I kind of stood there in silence kicking myself for not saying something more clever. But I think in that silence, I knew that somehow I made a friend for life. Turns out I was right. So as the years went by and me and Chris grew up together in our humble little neighborhood, we celebrated many birthdays and milestones together. But it wasn't until the 8th grade that we became really close. And I do want to mention that it was actually Chris who got me started in track in 8th grade. I never did say thank you for that. All those years of running in circles kept me nice and slender and awkward, and that was perfect, so thank you. Unfortunately, it was shortly after that Chris and I also discovered beer together. So all those years of running in circles went immediately down the drain, but that awkwardness stuck around, so it is what it is, you know? But anyways, back in the 8th grade, Chris and I got our first real girlfriends, and I say real because they were the first girls that we didn't just stare at from across the room awkwardly, and they actually willingly hung out with us for some reason. But it seemed like every week for a couple of years, Chris and I would have these parties at each other's houses where our girlfriends would sit, 5 feet away from us on the couch, and we would watch Sleepless in Seattle or You've Got Mail on loop for a long time. I've seen those movies too many times. Sorry about that. But I still look back on those times as some of the best in my life. And we both thought that we were in love back then, but that wasn't until we became freshmen in high school. So enter the 9th grade. I walk into my first day of business class and I meet a lovely young lady who was always so nice to me and so stunning, and her name was Mrs. Dost, my business teacher. Now, I don't exactly know Mrs. Dost's first name because she was always Mrs. Dost to me, but bear with me. Not only was Mrs. Dost nice to me, but she even made me student of the term in my first semester of freshman year. So right away, I had a great impression of the Dost family. I remember sitting there in class one day listening to a riveting talk, and I mean riveting, about balancing a checkbook. And I was thinking to myself, you know something? I bet this lady has a beautiful niece that is going to marry my best friend in 13 years. I don't know, it just came to me, and I was right, who knew? As the years went on, and mine and Chris's favorite drink changed quickly from Diet Pepsi to Diet Budweiser, Chris and I used to spend many of our weekends traveling the state to various shopping malls trying to get girls' phone numbers. After 20 or so malls, we wound up with no phone numbers. Perhaps it was the clone that we finally needed to douse ourselves in, or perhaps it was our combined weight of 162 pounds. Girls weren't exactly swooning over us. But I think, after all that, we both knew that the right girls were out there for us somewhere. Which brings me to Carrie. Carrie and Chris met almost 5 years ago on Valentine's Day, and quite frankly, the rest of the details of that night don't really matter. But I do remember that Chris and I had been living together in Watertown, which was actually our second time living together. The first time was in Roxbury. We lived together for 4 months in 2008, and despite all the shootings and robberies, it was the greatest 4 months of my life. But he had actually moved out of Watertown just about 2 months before that. I remember him calling me and telling me that he had a girl to introduce me to that he had met. And I could just tell by the sound of his voice that she was the one, and she was going to be last. She was going to last. So we got there in my place to introduce her, and right away I could tell she was a keeper. But it wasn't until I saw her dance moves a couple months later that I knew for sure, as you've all seen now tonight. So all in all, there are far too many stories for me to go over between me and Chris, and quite frankly, if I covered some of the good ones, I'd probably do them 5 to 10 by the end of the day. So I just want to cheers my best friend, who was the most intelligent and driven person I've ever met in my life. And I would also like to cheers the lovely young lady who stole his heart. Cheers to you both, and cheers to an amazing future. I love you guys.
Let's hear a round of applause. That was really very well done.